It's a great pleasure to meet Caterina Scalvedi, who's joining me from Bloomington, Indiana. Caterina is a co-winner of this year's article prize in modern Italian history, awarded by the Society for Italian Historical Studies, for her article, The Missionary at the Gate of Dawn, Educational Continuities from Fascist Somalia through the UN Order, 1920s, 1950s, which was published by Northeast African Studies just last year. I'm Dario Gaggio, and I teach at the University of Michigan. I was the chair of this year's jury for the prize. The other members of the committee were Juliana Camides from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and Michael Ebner from Syracuse University. We found Caterina Scalvedi's article very provocative and original. It's fair to say that we all learned a great deal from it. And today I have the wonderful opportunity to discuss this article and other things, hopefully, with its author. And I very much look forward to that conversation. But before we get to that, let me say a few words about Dr. Scalvedi's career and accomplishments. She's a historian of Italian colonialism who holds a laurea from Sapienza University in Rome, as well as a PhD from the University of Illinois in Chicago. She's taught at Wake Forest University and is now the Ragusa Fellow and visiting scholar at the Institute for European Studies and at Indiana University. She is currently working on a monograph titled Subjects of Empire, Educational Difference in Italian Colonialism, 1880s, 1950s, which we assume has grown from her dissertation. So maybe I can start our conversation by, first of all, congratulating you for the prize. I should mention that. But also by asking you how you came about your research topic, right, at the intersection of education and colonialism, especially in Somalia, although from the title of your monograph, future monograph, I gleaned that you may be also be expanding to other Italian colonies.
Thank you so much, Dario, for inviting me here in this interview, for your kind words about my article. It's really a pleasure. I'm delighted to be here today. So to answer your question, yes, I was in the first year of my PhD, and I was looking for sources on the history of education in Italian Africa, which was the topic of my dissertation and future monograph. And I was looking for sources for both the intellectual and social history of education. And since during my MA years at the University of Rome, La Sapienza, I wrote a thesis on the history of Protestant missionaries in Eritrea and Ethiopia. I was familiar with the potential of missionary sources for the study of education in colonial contexts, and especially the social aspects of education. So what happened in the classroom, the interaction between teachers and students, and so on. And so I was looking for missionary sources that could help me enter the classroom, because official governmental sources tend to be more statistical and from the perspective of Rome, of the colonial center back in the peninsula. So I went to a conference, my first conference in Austin, Texas, to present the research I did for my MA thesis. And there were only two of us working on Italian Africa at the conference. It was the Africa conference. And most people presented on other colonial contexts, of course. So I went to see the other paper, the presentation of the other paper, and it was on Somalia, and specifically on the creation of plantation system, on the plantation system of Somalia in the south of Somalia. And then I asked the person if the presenter if there was any school in the like related to the plantation economy, and the answer was yes. There were actually Catholic missionaries that appeared in the sources related to plantations here and there, and so there I realized that. This was a page of Somali history and the colonial history of Africa that was not researched and that needed some attention. So I went to continue my search and found very interesting sources produced by the Catholic missionaries who worked in Somalia. First of all, the Consolata missionaries, the male missionaries of the Consolata Order, and their archive is located in Rome. The female missionaries of the Consolata Order, their archive is located in Nepi, and I was also able to see the photographic evidence, the pictures that the missionaries both took and collected from other photographs in the colony. And the photographic section of the Consolata archive is located in Turin. And then I continued my search and found also a great body of sources produced by the friar minors, the other male missionary orders that operated in Somalia during the Italian period. So sorry for the very long answer.
No, it's very interesting.
But this is how I came about my research topic, looking for the record of, what happened at schools. And then as I was doing research and followed the post-war trajectories of the friar minors and the female Consolata missionaries, I found out that they actually stayed in Somalia well beyond the fall of the Italian Empire in the early 1940s, well into the period of the British military occupation in the 40s, the trust territory of Somalia in the 1950s, and even beyond, actually, all the way through the early 90s when civil war started in Somalia, and the cathedral was destroyed and the missionaries were expelled. My dissertation brought me to the Somali, the missionary, the history of missionary education in Somalia during the first half of the 20th century and even beyond.
So I didn't realize that you started, in a sense, as a historian of Eritrea and Somalia and Eritrea and Ethiopia, and then right. So obviously you also have a pretty good grasp on the history of Italian colonialism in the rest of the Horn of Africa, I take it, right? Yeah, that's wonderful. So another, obviously a very important dimension of your research deals with this complicated relationship, right, between missionaries and the colonial authorities, right, in Somalia in particular, right, where we may want to zero in a little bit on the article. And I was struck by how complex, right, that relationship was in so many ways. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the relationship between these missionaries and the colonial authorities, let's say in the period of in the fascist period, especially, and maybe what we can glean from that, right, to address maybe some broader considerations about the relationship even between the Catholic Church, right, and the fascist regime, especially in colonial settings.
Yeah, so the relationship between the Catholic Church and the fascist regimes has been the focus of much attention among historians that have showed the tension between fascist authorities and Catholic Vatican authorities, but also, of course, the process of reconciliation that took place between the Italian state and the Catholic Church in the 20s, of course, peaking with the Lateran Pacts in 1929. And what I show in my research on missionary education in Somalia is that Somalia was an arena for deep collaboration between fascist authorities and Vatican authorities through the activities of the missionaries on the spot, who acted as intermediaries, of course, but also as those who enacted the collaboration on the ground. And I would say that this collaboration preceded the process of reconciliation, because we could say that consolata, male and female missionaries on the one hand, and the governor De Vecchi, and then even Corni, the two governors of Somalia between, in the 1920s, collaborated on many, many levels. First of all, of course, on the creation of a colonial school system in Somalia. And so, of course, there were tensions. This relationship, as you said, was complex. The tensions, however, I would say, mostly regarded the education of the children of the Italian settlers in Somalia, because the fascist regime wanted to hold the monopoly over their education. And so the missionaries were assigned the monopoly over the education of the Somali colonial subjects, and not the Italian students, the children of Italian citizens that lived in the colony. And this was because, of course, the fascist authorities still wanted to use education as a tool to make Italians fascist more than Catholics, right? And education has always been a terrain for competition between church, state and church, especially, I would say, in the fascist ventennio. But still, when it came to the education of colonial subjects, collaboration and mutual trust prevailed. And so, of course, I don't want to say that the collaboration of Somalia had a direct impact on the process of reconciliation and the signing of the Lateran Pacts. That would be too much. But certainly my research shows that there was an instance of unprecedented mutual trust and collaboration that took place since the early 20s. And one reason for that is because it was actually the fascist authorities in the colonies that appointed, of course, with the approval of the Pope and the Vatican authorities, that appointed directly the missionary orders that would work in the colony. And so it was the fascist authorities who chose that the missionaries would be Italian, of course, and from a missionary order that had proven to be nationalist, loyal to the fatherland, and also supportive of the regime in one way or another. And so the Consolata missionaries and first and the friar minors later had a history of loyalty to the Italian state. And so the careful choosing of these missionary orders, I think, was a crucial factor for the collaboration that followed in the colony, because the fascist state knew that they would be reliable and loyal teachers, right? And also skilled teachers. And because in both cases, the missionaries who worked in Somalia from the Consolata and the prior minors orders had already worked as missionaries in colonial contexts, either in the Italian Empire, in other colonies, or in neighboring colonies of other empires, especially the British.
Yeah. Although the rules of the game were somewhat complicated, right? There were so these missionaries were not allowed to proselytize among Muslim subjects, right? Did you find so was that ban, so to speak, respected? I from your article, it seems that these missionaries did play by the rules, right? Overall, or yeah, I mean, maybe not completely.
They did because they didn't want to lose their monopoly over the education of the Somali students. So they actually even taught principles of Islam in the classroom. So I found a few references of Islam and Islamic, rituals and traditions in the textbooks that the missionaries wrote, especially in the 1930s. And this was a strategy for the missionaries to attract students who came from, of course, Muslim families, and also to respect the officials' order to provide a secular education and not a Catholic, and if anything, an education that would meet the students' religious needs, because it had happened in other colonies that, and even in Somalia, that some students and parents complained about the Catholic character of schools, and the regime didn't want that to be a factor for resistance or criticism of the Italian presence in the colony, in Somalia, in the region, right? So yes, it was very, very important for authorities that the missionaries respected this principle also. And this happened all over colonial context, all over Africa, not only in the Italian Empire. I wasn't, I mean, some missionaries, especially nuns, sometimes baptized children in a periculo mortis, and this was
when we're in danger of dying.
They did so, not playing, but I mean, disrespecting the rules and without being seen. But I found references to this in the missionaries' diaries and registers, and yeah. But these were rare instances. I would say that overall, yes, they played by the rules.
But also, as I'm sure in all kinds of other colonial contexts, these missionaries also faced this very diverse population, right? So of mixed race pupils, of course, of students of different, I mean, of girls and boys, and also pupils coming from different strata of society, right? And so I wonder if I mean, so your archive is so rich, right, with all these stories, and you follow even some trajectories, right? Some personal trajectories. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit about those trajectories and the ways in which this missionary work, or better yet, right, this educational work performed by missionaries interacted, right, with these. So whether it solidified the stratification of society and or challenged it a little bit as well, right? I mean, I think there is a lot in your article, and I imagine also in the rest of your work, that speaks to these complexities in terms of social mobility. I mean, I hesitate to use that term, but and stratification.
Yeah, so one way I approach the study of missionary work in Somalia is to define missionaries as skilled migrant workers, right? They were skilled because they had the knowledge and the skills to navigate colonial societies and the complex interactions between different social constituencies, we could say, and religious and cultural and linguistic groups, right? And these, the missionaries further developed these skills by staying in the colony for longer, right? And as I show in my article, some of these missionaries stayed in the colony and then the trust territory and then the independent state of Somalia for decades. They spent most of their lives in Somalia. And so their skills when it came to the crucial role of intermediaries between state, religious, and civil society, but also their skills as educators, right, who have to teach a foreign language, Italian, to people whose native language certainly is not Italian, but also their skills to transform students, diverse students, into workers. And this was, as I show in my article, the primary goal of colonial missionary schools. And this was because the colonial state always needed workers and didn't have enough of them in the colonial space. And so appointed missionaries the work of producing reliable, productive, and of course, cheap workers. And the missionaries designed school curricula that would, try to accomplish this goal. And not only in the 20s and 30s, but also, as I show in the articles, also in the 50s. And so when Somalia was not a colony, formally speaking, anymore, but it was a United Nations trust territory assigned to it, assigned back.
Right, indeed, one of the most interesting aspects of your article, and I think also of your research more generally, is that you start, this article starts in the fascist period and then takes the narrative and the analysis into, the British period, right, of the mid to late 1940s, and then to the trusteeship, right, that of the United Nations that is awarded, so to speak, to Italy, and the article is really interesting in the ways in which it tracks a lot of continuities, right? Some discontinuities as well, some differences as well. So I don't know if you can speak a little bit to those continuities and also some of those really interesting, also minor, but perhaps relevant discontinuities between the fascist period and the United Nations order, as you call it, right? In your I think article as well, right? Or in your
yeah. And I think that the potential of addressing missionaries as skilled migrant workers and the potential of looking at missionary education as an entry point into the history of the Italian presence in Somalia is that this perspective allows to retrace the continuities beyond the usual separation between the fascist and the post-fascist period, but also, the monarchic and the republican, the colonial and the trusteeship periods. Because the missionaries, as I show in the article, always stayed in the colony across these different eras. And so the usual periodization, the usual political periodization doesn't apply or applies only in minor ways to the history of education and missionary education, specifically of Somalia. And so the continuities that I retrace concern the infrastructural, institutional, and ideological aspects of education. So I showed that not only the buildings that hosted schools remained the same from the 20s through the 19th, through the 50s, but also the teachers themselves, the missionaries, who of course monopolized the education of colonial students during the colonial period, and then did not monopolize anymore the same field in the 50s, but occupied leadership positions in the organization of schools in the 50s. The same teachers meant also very similar pedagogies between the fascists and the UN orders. The same pedagogies included textbooks and pedagogic equipment that was produced by the same actors, by the same authors. And so I compare the textbooks that were produced and printed by the missionaries in the 1930s with those that were produced and printed by the missionaries in the 50s. And some things changed, but very little, I would say, when it comes to the educational project and goals that the textbooks carry with them, right? So of course, all the pictures of Mussolini, the fascist, rhetoric of the 30s is fully erased. But it's replaced with the flags of the United Nations, the Somali flag, and the Italian flag stays in the material. But the goal of transforming students into workers remain, and also the paternalistic ideology rhetoric of the Italians bringing civilization, modernization to Africa. That remains the same, and so this is very clear if we compare the textbooks. They're very similar. Many stories are just copied and pasted, and the authors of the textbooks were actually the same missionaries who had authored, as I said, the textbooks, but also other former teachers at colonial schools all over Italian Africa, which is very interesting to me. So, and specifically the textbook I analyzed that was produced in the 50s is called Alba Radiosa, and
hence the title of your article, right?
Yeah, the article
Gone, right? Yeah.
I'm prouder of in this article because it's actually, I don't know if you got it, it's a reference to an album by the Pink Floyd.
That's right. Of course.
The Piper at the Gates of Dawn from 1967. And yeah,
Yes.
it was a small joke, but yeah, the title of the textbook entered the title as well.
So we don't have much time left. Unfortunately, I wonder if you could speak a little bit about the process of publication of the article. I think that this article actually came out in an issue, right, that dealt with a particular theme. So I don't know if you want to say anything about the publication process and your relationship with the journal and the editors maybe of this issue.
Yeah, sure. The article was published in a special issue on labor in the journal Northeast African Studies, and it actually originated in a workshop that took place in Pavia in 2021, organized by Massimo Zaccaria and Valentina Fusari. And actually, it was thanks to I want to thank them again because it's thanks to them if I decided to really make labor the central theme of the article, and it was thanks to them if they pushed me to read missionary sources through the lenses of labor, not only education, which was my primary interest. And this proved very productive, I think, because I was able not only to retrace missionaries as workers, but also the labor-centered ideology that missionary education carried. And yeah, so the publishing process, of course, followed this workshop, and we decided to publish this special issue together. And they too published articles on other aspects of the broad history of labor in Italian colonialism. And I also wish to thank Anna Fenton Hathaway, who helped me edit the article. As a non-English native speaker, I mean, it was very important to have a professional editor also look at my article from a linguistic perspective.
All right, Caterina. So this has been a wonderful conversation. I want to thank you again for the opportunity to, for submitting this article. Congratulate you again on winning this prize. Best of luck for the future, right? And I hope that our paths will cross again soon.
I hope so too. Thank you so much. It's been a very pleasant conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.